Hello, welcome to Tales Under the Cat Tree. My name is Dileepu Jayawardena, better known as Dupes. In this podcast, we'll explore the wonderful worlds created by words on paper, from technology and the future to fiction and other realms. If you want to get to know me and find out who I am, you can listen to episode number 1, where I attempt to put you to sleep with all the gory details. Please remember that all my writing is available on my Substack at tales.dupes.ca, including the articles that make up this episode. If you enjoy this or any of my writing, please do subscribe to either this podcast or the Substack, where I hope to bring you articles, stories, and interviews regularly. Welcome to episode 9 for the week of June 29th, 2025, or better known as the week of Canada Day. This is my 24th Canada Day as a Canadian citizen, the 33rd since I came to the rocky shores of Newfoundland, and the 8th since I moved to Finland for work. People often ask me where home is. As I have expressed elsewhere, I tend to respond that home and I have a complicated relationship. In truth, though, where home is can be explained quite simply if I look at it purely from a country and geography perspective. If places were women, for example, then Newfoundland would be my first true love, and with it, the country of Canada. 33 years later, I have a semblance of an answer as to why perhaps I chose Newfoundland and Canada so easily. When I came to Newfoundland, I was desperate for a home and a place of peace from an unsettled childhood. And despite finding that peace, my unsettling need to explore everything around me matches the very nature of Canada and Newfoundland. It is no wonder, then, that I feel most at home when I am staring through the churning, ice-laden seas of Newfoundland to lands I long to still explore. Canada, for me, as it does for many people, brings to mind vistas of natural grandeur, the towering guardians of rock, windswept landscapes through which wide, untamed rivers tumble, or the sun-drenched plains of natural antiquity. It is not a peaceful vastness that lies before me. It is an enormity of sight, sound, smell, and touch, with a sense of grumbling awe or wildness stirring underneath. As a late 20th century immigrant to this land, I suspect that it is no different than what our First Nations people felt when they wandered through the inhospitable tundras to find places of respite. It is a thread that connects them to all of us more recent explorers, though now we are all protected by modern conveniences. As a country and a political entity, we are by no means perfect. Human selfishness and greed have sidelined and in many cases destroyed the lives of many of our First Nations. The same negative forces threaten how we treat a diverse nation now and into the future. But despite all this, Newfoundland and Canada have given me both the sense of peace and the hunger to explore. Every Canada Day, I wrestle with where we could be, but acknowledge the greatness that we are. I understand today, in order for us to be a true North, strong and free, we must stand together. All of us, whether new or ancient, we are the guardians of that beautiful and awesome slumbering giant beneath our feet. Our Canada, you are my home and native land. For this Canada Day episode of 2025, I would like to take you on a journey exploring that vastness on a road that takes us through French and English history and through to the rich history of our native First Nations people. Indeed, this journey encompasses all the goodness and the beauty of Canada, as well as the harms we have done and continue to do as a nation. It is a journey that my friends and I undertook in 2008, and it is based on journals I was keeping at the time. We drove from Montreal, where we were living, to James Bay in northern Quebec. It is a road far less traveled. The photos I took are available on my photo galleries at photos.dups.ca and others on my Substack at tales.dupes.ca. You may read these written journals as well on my Substack under Life and Travel. June 25th, 2008, somewhere near Val d'Or, Quebec. So here we are on the outskirts of Val d'Or, Quebec. Our camp has been struck, and the next part of our epic journey to Radisson and Chisasibi is about to begin. Yes, that is our objective, from Montreal to Chisasibi on James Bay. A few thousand kilometers on some of North America's most remote roads. We are going to swim in Hudson's Bay, in other words, the Arctic Ocean. The only problem is that we only have 6 nights between Saint Jean-Baptiste and Canada Day to make it there and back. Most of our friends have either exclaimed jealousy or feared that one, two, or all of us will not actively make it back. Okay, so first, let me go through the players in our trip. Mike, intrepid traveler. Dr. Mannion, a one-time commander of the Royal Anarcho-Geographic Society of Newfoundland, or RAGSON. With his credentials, you would think he would be smarter than to follow yet another harebrained scheme. But I would like to point out that this was all Mike's idea, though he does like to pass it off saying that he had read about it on the internet somewhere and exclaimed, that's something crazy enough for dupes to do. I personally think that he's actually crazier than I, despite what he says. Then we have Jen Arsenault, who jumped at the chance and immediately started booking stuff in Chisasibi and Radisson. Jen hasn't really traveled with Mike or I, and I'm not sure she knows what she's in for. But then, after the first day, I might note that she's likely madder than all of us put together. At least she has made sure that Mike and I didn't end up in Chisasibi with no food except for a bottle of scotch. And we come to dupes. Yes, me. What can I say? The man who inspires more women to want to mother me, the man who cut his fingers with an axe just a year ago, the man whose very desire to have an adventure results in Craig Welsh preparing to write a biography and eulogy. But this will be my 7th Canada Day and 6th Canada Day adventure. I can now count Ottawa, Hay River, Whitehorse, Edmonton, Waterton, and Montreal since my citizenship ceremony in 2001. You would think after all our adventures and years of camping, this would be a cinch. Oh, you haven't gone on a trip with us yet. To complicate things further, despite us going in my car with me driving the initial leg, I have no clue where we are actually going. I haven't looked at a proper map. I barely know the names of towns in order and apparently thought the name of the bay was actually the town that we were going to. Oops. In my defense, I'm also in the middle of moving apartments and planning a trip to the UK for a wedding. I left all of this to Mike and Jen. My job on the final day in Montreal was simply to pack the car. The second was easy considering I was camping at Mike's anyway due to Quebec's insane moving day shenanigans. Mike's house, or as Niall has dubbed it, the Cuthbert Hilton Hotel for wayward Newfoundlanders in Montreal, has become the staging ground for Niall and Rebecca's move to their new apartment, my move to my apartment, and our trip to James Bay. I think Mike is ignoring the mess his house has become. The plan was simple. I would wake up at 5 a.m., work till 2 p.m., pack the car with Jen, pick up Mike at 3:30, and head out of town to Val d'Or, a drive of about 7 hours. The plan was going well, except then I almost forgot the medical kit. Niall shook his head, pressed a lighter and knife into my hands, and looked at me in the eye and said, "You'll thank me for this later." I'm not sure if he meant I was going to burn the car, stab myself with a knife, or a combination of both. I don't think he considers a return in one piece very likely. You know, there are many things I like about Montreal. Driving in Montreal just does not happen to be one of them. Case in point, on a Wednesday afternoon, we encountered no less than 6 traffic jams between Montreal and 150 kilometers outside of Montreal, mostly due to the incredible amount of road design, which involved funneling 4 lanes of traffic down to 1 and then to 4 again. I'm beginning to think Montreal road planners have just taken lessons from the devil. Jen, the only Quebecer amongst us, commented, "Oh, we can do so much worse. This is actually good." If this is good, the hope of my retaining any sanity is not good. I believe at some point at Mont Tremblant, Mike truly realized what kind of idiocy he had yet again associated himself with. In the space of 15 minutes, he saw Jen realize she had lost a credit card earlier that day, and dupes trying to drive with the handbrake on. Poor Mike. Years of becoming a learned man of science and stuck with fools. Supper was in Mont-Laurier as the sun was setting. We decided to stop at a brasserie. Vegetarians beware, food choices are becoming limited. And as Mike ordered his poutine and squeaky cheese while tapping his fingers to Bon Jovi and covers of old country songs, he said, "Why fight it?" Having completely confused the restaurant workers by not ordering beer and further interrupting their ability to have smoke breaks, we finally received our fries, poutine, and sandwiches in about an hour. Our bill showed up in another hour, in between 4 cigarettes and a few dirty looks. We were not making any friends. As night descended, we made our way to Val d'Or. We hadn't made any reservations for camping, let alone looked up campsites. We were going on the assumption that there would actually be camping. Around midnight, we pulled into the roundabout that signals the start of Val d'Or. Rather than trusting our camping GPS tracking sensors, we pulled into a Shell station and asked for directions. Jen noted the complicated directions involved following Rue Barrette, and so we drove on. After half an hour of driving rue Barrette through unpaved roads, woods, and construction sites, we ended up at a roundabout. Do you ever have a sinking feeling deep down inside that something has gone horribly wrong? Me, behind the wheel of the car after 20 hours of being awake, had that sensation. I said, fuck. It's the same roundabout. To which my esteemed and learned travelers exclaimed, No, it cannot be. There goes my trust in our sense of direction and ability to spot landmarks. Niall, I sense you might be right. Are we going to make it back? Yes, we had gone in a big circle and come right back to the start. We headed to the Shell station again. Finally, with directions and a map, we made it to our campsite. I was exhausted. I was pushing 20 hours of being awake plus 6 hours of driving in the dark. We pitched the tent, threw our shoes outside, and promptly fell asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, we all realized that leaving our shoes outside in what was pouring rain was not smart. Apparently, we had all turned over in our sleeping bags, muttered the universal term of ignorance of reality, fuck it, and busily slept through to the buzzing of mosquitoes. June 26, 2008. Rupert River, somewhere on Highway 109, northern Quebec. Somewhere around 10 p.m. Finally, some respite from the bugs and mosquitoes. I am ensconced in my tent, and the mozzies are left outside looking in, salivating at the warm bodies within. Not that they should be despondent. Their brothers and sisters have already taken their pound of flesh from my body. The bastards. Well, let's rewind to the morning, in which we found the heroes finally awake from their slumber after a night of touring the outskirts of Val d'Or. As we left them, they had wondered about the shoes they had left outside in the sound of pounding rain. Indeed, yes, our shoes were soaked. Breakfast started spectacularly when, under the care of Herr Dr. Mannion, a plastic case was melted over the stovetop. Nevertheless, despite the noxious fumes, breakfast was had, camp was struck, and away we went. Our goal today was Matagami for lunch, and then to camp by Rupert River, halfway to the town of Radisson. The highlight of the journey so far has been Lac Paradis, an emerald green lake just past Amos, Quebec. The scenery has involved hundreds of kilometers of forest, sleepy suburban towns, open-pit mines, and several billion bugs. If I ever become a godlike supreme being, there are many things I will do. First, I would get rid of Air Canada. Then, I would get rid of biting black flies and mosquitoes. Our efforts to combat this nuisance have so far involved the erection of a rather spectacular net-lined tent brought by Jen and owned by her brother. It was only when we were in the throes of putting it up that she revealed her brother did not actually like this thing. The setup involved several poles labeled 1 through 9, each of which connected in some arcane fashion and disconnected randomly during the process. All three of us had breakdowns putting the thing up. At one point, as poles about me snapped and the tent started caving in for the 5th time, I swore that the inventor of the tent had better end up in hell. Nevertheless, we did manage to erect it. How good is it at combating the bug horde? The jury is still out. So what is James Bay like? Personally, it is all I hoped for and more. The remote road winds through some subtly scenic terrain. We aren't talking about breathtaking beauty. As Jen puts it, the beauty in this land is in the small things, and of course in its people. The beauty is in the looming large clouds washing the leaves in the rain. There are stunted trees, large trees, and the quiet of nature. Having said that, let me quickly mention where we are camping. Rivière Rupert is a very large river whose rapids are anything but subtle. The signs note that the volume of 800 Olympic-sized pools is emptied over the rapids and falls. I'm hoping the photos will do it justice, but I doubt it. I have now been to Niagara Falls, and despite the river being smaller and the falls shallower, this is somehow more beautiful, more epic, more forceful. Allow me to indulge and be a bit reflective. Since becoming Canadian citizen, when I made the pact to spend Canada Day weekend somewhere new in Canada each year, I have truly come to appreciate the nuances of the country that is Canada. It is something every Canadian should try. I have seen the patriotism of Ottawa, the wilderness of the Northwest Territories, the emptiness of the Alaska Highway, the family nature of prairie life in Edmonton, the joie de vivre of Montreal, and now the subtle northern beauty of James Bay. And here I am only getting started. I can't wait to see what tomorrow will bring. June 27th, James Bay at the Arctic Ocean. We've made it to the Arctic Ocean. Well, at least James Bay. To all the naysayers, I say, woohoo! The day began ominously with the three of us by the side of the Rupert River staring at hundreds of mosquitoes in the netting of our tent. They were waiting. We were the blood bags of their dreams, and I was the exotic Sri Lankan meat here. We ran out of the tent into bright blue skies and sunshine. I decided to do what Mike had done the previous day and brave the cold river to bathe. Believe me when I say it was cold, but I smelled less. Breakfast done, we entered the car only to find a literal 1,000 mosquitoes had taken residence. Lesson: do not leave your car doors open while having breakfast. We hightailed it out of Rupert River with windows down and Mike and Jen bravely throwing or killing mosquitoes one by one. How long do muzzies live for? A few weeks? In which case, there might be a few by the time we reach Montreal still. Today's journey saw some beautiful sights as we headed to Radisson. Sandy areas that look like desert, calm lakes, the gorge of East Main River. As we neared Radisson, the great hydroelectric projects of Hydro-Quebec became obvious. So much so that when we arrived in Radisson, we immediately went to book our tour of the dams. Our plan tonight is to sleep in Chisasibi, and if at all possible, by James Bay itself. With directions in hand, we headed to Chisasibi. I believe we were all hitting our breaking points of car inactivity by this point. As the paved road ended and the gravel road began, the end, however, was within reach. After a few tantalizing turns, we were at James Bay. The wide bay spread luxuriantly ahead of us, and we were met with that salt breeze and smell of algae. After securing our tent, we went tidal pool hopping and swimming in the Arctic Ocean. What we thought was paradise was infested with mozzies, though. I gamely cooked supper while mozzies tried to find a centimeter along my arm with space to suck blood from. Jen kindly gave me one of her mozzie head nets while we waited for the sunset, which was one of the most beautiful I have ever seen. Tomorrow, we canoe with Sherman. June 28th, 2008, James Bay, Quebec. If I thought yesterday was a highlight, today eclipsed it. I've written journal entries in some odd places. In the middle of a field of goats in Siberia, in a camp delirious with sickness in Tanzania, if I were to name but a two. This ranks right up there. Currently, I'm sitting in James Bay itself, on a rock, in a mudflat, at extreme low tide. The sun is setting on the Arctic Ocean, and I'm being eaten alive by mosquitoes, but it is worth it. Today, Jen had planned for us to go canoeing down Rivière La Grande, from the town of Chisasibi to the mouth of the river. Our guide was Sherman Herudi, whom we met on time in his office in Chisasibi. Sherman, or as we found out later, the impressively named Wilfred Frank Sherman Shumez Herudi Schnowboy. I hope I got that correct. He's an elder now, and pretty much is Chisasibi's tourism board. His office is littered with maps and pamphlets, and fossil rocks he's collected from all over the region. After a lengthy introduction where we looked through photos and rocks, we headed to the river and climbed in canoes, and off we went. Jen was paddling with Sherman, while Mike and I brought up the rear in a canoe that always wanted to go right, and which Sherman later pointed out had also sprung a leak. After an hour of effortless paddling, we arrived at the mouth of the river. We ditched our canoes and headed down the beach for a walk. Jen, Sherman, and I headed over bog and streams to Black Island to find Labrador tea. Mike stayed at the beach. Mike later said this was the highlight of the day for him. Once we had disappeared, Mike realized with us gone, he was in the most remote area alone for the first time in his life. Naturally, he went swimming, by himself in the Arctic Ocean. Perhaps my stupid gene is contagious to those that travel with me. Meanwhile, Jen and I followed Sherman and even ditched our shoes as we waded across the streams. Sherman regaled us with stories and Cree herbal remedies. I tried some wild cranberry and collected the leaves of the Labrador tea for later. Heading back, we were amazed at how fast the tide was coming in. In mere minutes, feet of beach vanished before our eyes. When we got to the beach, where we had left Mike, we were shocked to find no beach. Meanwhile, Mike, seeing the tide turn, had returned to the canoes and pulled them up. Thankfully, he was watching the beach vanish and wondering if we were going to make it back. Suffice it to say, we did make it back, and we set back up the river. This was much harder work. With views of magnificent grey owls, we headed to Fort George, which had been resettled to Chisasibi when the reservoirs had been built. Sherman showed us where he had lived before, where he had hung out and played ice hockey. He showed us the church he was married in, and on the way he taught us a few words and phrases, which I'm sure I will massacre by writing or saying them now. Wachia Dupes, si kanasan. Hello, my name is Dupes. Sitting in the church, the four of us discussed everything from skinning moose to the relationship with Hydro-Quebec and the change in their society due to the dams. Here was the elder teaching the strangers. This was a highlight for me. Along with playing that old pipe organ in the church, I played Handapani, I suspect the very first Sri Lankan song played in that church ever by the side of the Arctic Ocean. I should mention that the day was hot, and even I, with my tropically attuned body, was wilting in the hot northern sun. We also hadn't eaten anything all day. By the time we returned to the car and paid Sherman, we were all starving. We rushed back to the bay, and I cooked supper while Mike and Jen put up the tent. I should mention that our car now smells pretty bad. It turns out, in the heat, a couple of candles melted and a bottle of garlic and oil had exploded on Mike's sleeping bag. Hopefully garlic has the same effect on blood-sucking mosquitoes as it does on blood-sucking vampires. Speaking of which, the sun has set, and so must I, before the mosquitoes eat me alive. Goodbye, James Bay. Till next time. Wachia. 29th of June, 2008. The 562-kilometer marker, James Bay Highway. We are on our way back. We are smelly, dirty, unkempt. In other words, a bunch of annoying campers. I'd like to say a lot happened today, but compared to the other days, today was fairly anticlimactic. If by anticlimactic you are talking about looking at one of the largest, most amazing hydroelectric projects in the world. We couldn't come all this way and not see why this road even existed. Hydro-Quebec. Hydro-Quebec created the road to get to the huge dams they built in the Grande Rivière Basin. Dams so large they comprise some of the world's greatest man-made lakes. After having heard Sherman's views on Hydro-Quebec, which had so dramatically changed and mostly destroyed their ways of life, we had to dutifully go see the other side of the story. We packed up our gear on James Bay, filled up in Chisasibi, and we went to see the free tour of LG2, or La Grande Deux, or Central Robert Bourassa Reservoir, and hydroelectric project. Before setting off on the French tour, we decided to partake in our first non-camp meal at the only local restaurant. Then we piled into an amphitheater for an hour-long presentation, followed by a bus. Let me say that I did see and learn some neat things. And no, it wasn't exciting. I may actually be completely bored of electricity. The tour could be done in much less time. Let's go through it. First, the dam wall, the evacuation passage. All dynamited out of granite rock of the Canadian Shield. The evacuation channel can hold as much as 2 St. Lawrence rivers. It is indeed that large. We learned about the diversion and delved deep into the complex where our cameras were not allowed. We saw the turbine, which was very cool, and the grand passageways built deep into the ground that the water passes through to provide electricity to Quebec and the eastern seaboard of the United States. 2 things I noted from the Hydro-Quebec propaganda. 1, the reason to do this was the environmental impact was low. And 2, the local First Nations people welcomed and worked with the Hydro-Quebec. Welcome to Propaganda 101. However, I can't be completely hypocritical. Without these hydroelectric generators, we in Montreal would have no electricity. Well, there you go. I'm sure the rest can be gleaned from some well-placed Google and Wikipedia searches. As a tour guide kept repeating like a mantra just in case we forgot how big and important this was. C'est très impressionnant. We grabbed a couple of beers and had supper in town when, ironically, the power in the town went out for a brief few minutes. We then headed out of town and south on our way back home. It has been an incredible journey. An unbelievable journey. And I repeat, but not about the reservoir of Hydro-Quebec. C'est très impressionnant. You've been listening to journals that I wrote in 2008. Much has changed along the road to James Bay since then. For example, Rupert River, on whose sides we sat and we watched ginormous amount of water coming down through its rapids and falls, has been diverted to the East Main Reservoir in 2009. I haven't been there, but I kind of assume that the water levels have come down quite dramatically. I do not know what has happened in Chisasibi or Fort George since this time. I hope that in listening to this, you remember that even great hydroelectric projects, even green energy, does come at a cost, and that cost can be the societies that we upend in order to build them. This summer, with Canada Strong, Canadians have the opportunity to visit Canada as never before and for much cheaper. Please take the opportunity. And at every opportunity as well, do try to learn about our First Nations and their impact on the land and what they mean to Canada. On this episode, I want to thank my colleague Bartosz, who introduced me to Whisper.cpp for the Macintosh. With that program, I was able to speak these journals into the computer, as this week has been extremely difficult for me to type. I will get into that at some point in the future. So thank you very much for listening. No matter where you are in the world, happy Canada Day. Thank you again for listening to Tales Under the Cat Tree podcast. I will be back next week with another episode. You can reach me through email at contact@dups.ca, bluesky@dups.ca, or on my site and this post at tales.dups.ca. Remember to subscribe so I can get to know you better and learn from you. Give your pet a cuddle and your loved ones a hug till we meet again for some Tales Under the Cat Tree.